no sooner had I put the phone in the cradle than that third plane hit the Pentagon and just jarred everybody inside from left to right. And I instinctively ducked under my desk, having been trained to do so, and not really knowing, where the plane had impacted. Not knowing, I think I thought it was a plane had hit the building, but that instinct to duck, and then when you look up and you're like, okay, I'm all right. Well, now what? Well, now we got to get out of this building.
Welcome back to another episode of the Cultivus podcast, where we share stories of adversity that God uses to cultivate growth, strength, purpose, resilience, and all kinds of traits that we need every day. My name is Dave Carroll. I'm the host. I've got an extremely special guest. Before we get into that, today's episode is sponsored by One Stop Media KY. One Stop Media KY is your one-stop shop for all of your video needs, especially for business owners, entrepreneurs out there. We love to help you create content that makes a massive difference on your social media, your website, YouTube. However we can help, let us know. Please visit onestopmediaky.com today for more information and to inquire. This is a very special moment for me. Before I get, I had such a great experience. I had the opportunity to meet my friend Angela through her sister, actually. Mm-hmm. I was able to film some video for Christy, and yes, she introduced us. And so before we get into how I met you, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and who you are, what you do, where you're from?
Sure, Dave. Happy to. I'm Angela Billings. I'm a Kentucky native. Grew up in Bardstown, so about 40 miles south of where we are right now today in Louisville. I am a 22-year Air Force veteran, so I served all around the world as a public affairs officer for our armed forces. And I convinced my husband, whom I met in Alaska along the way, to move to Kentucky. And he's not a real fan of the humidity, but that's a testament of his love for me.
He does love me.
He loves me a lot. So we retired here in 2012 and have been here since. And I am currently the Director of Communications for the Kentucky Senate Majority in Frankfort. And I authored a book earlier this year.
Let's go. Can you show off your book?
Yes. It's called Command the Crisis, Navigate Chaos with Battle-Tested Public Relations and Communication Strategies. This baby, which is just like having a baby.
A longer process, let's just be clear.
A little bit longer than 9 months for sure. But it's a business book. It's designed to help leaders, both business owners, professional communicators, take a little bit about what I experienced and learned as a professional communicator in combat at times, and leverage that experience and my learning in order to be better communicators themselves.
Man, so much to unpack. We could probably have like 7 episodes in a row to talk about all the things.
7, that's a long-term commitment, Dave. Are you sure you want to sign on to that?
we could have a lot of episodes to talk about your life, I feel like. But I kind of, want to dive in a little bit deeper into how your upbringing in Bardstown, mm-hmm. How that led you into the armed forces. Mm-hmm. And kind of just your early life to get into where you were, before all of the crisis that you had to help command.
Sure. So I am number 5 of 6 children. I was raised Catholic, a large Catholic community in Bardstown. And both my father had served in the military, as did both of my older brothers. And as I was trying to figure out, what I wanted to do in life and how I was going to use the talents that God gave me naturally, I became a business major in college because that seemed like a really easy thing to do until I flunked pre-cal. And then I'm like, maybe I should do something a little different that doesn't involve so many numbers. So the talents and skills that God gave me is speaking and writing and talking. And so I switched majors. I finished my undergraduate degree at U of L and was commissioned the next year and joined the armed services, the Air Force specifically. In 1990 was when I joined the service.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, thank you for your service as well, and I know that you got to have a plethora of experience in the Air Force. So
It was a wild ride.
yes, as everyone will find out, it was a very wild ride. So from the time that you started in the Air Force, kind of what was that experience like for you coming? Obviously, you had some you had family that had experienced the armed services, but like for you personally, like was there like a culture shock? Were there things that you experienced that were just like totally out of the realm of what you thought was going to happen?
Well, probably yes. I don't know if I really had a lot of preconceived notions. I knew that I wanted to perform. I wanted to contribute to the mission. That kind of coming from a large family. Everybody has to pull their own weight, right?
Right. You're on a big team, right?
Yes. So I think that my formative years prepared me for becoming part of a team. Of course, it's a challenge when you move someplace away from home. I had lived on my own in an apartment the last couple of years of college, but I was still really, really close to family. So my first orders were for Acre Air Force Base in Blytheville, Arkansas. So not terribly far away, but it was still, kind of on my own,
Not
really
home.
for the first time, not home. So. And when you're, a young single woman, you're trying to figure out who you are, what you're about, and certainly, I joined the service. It's an inherently risky kind of career,
Right.
right? And then, of course, as many people experience when you're a young adult and on your own, you're faced with situations that you hadn't been faced with before. So you get to make choices. We all get to make our choices. And not all of mine were the best, but I navigated through that. I met some extraordinary people along the way, people who mentored me, both professionally and spiritually early on, who helped me navigate in a world where I was unaccustomed to being.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so your Catholic upbringing, right? I know that you are a dear sister in Christ as well. Not only a fantastic, all the other things that you are, by God's goodness and grace.
Yes, absolutely. Only.
So what was the experience like of you coming to know the Lord and in combination with being, in this fight, right? In this, in these wars and in these, not necessarily even, boots on the ground wars per se, but the warfare that is navigating these hard crises and things that you had to navigate in the Air Force.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I met a lot of people along the way. My first exposure to combat was Desert Storm that we had been building up for about 6 months. I was still in Arkansas, and I thought, well, they haven't deployed me yet. I guess I'm just going to stay right here. And, then we started the fight, and then they decided we are going to deploy your unit from the 97th Bomb Wing at Acre Air Force Base. So I was part of the initial cadre to Fairford, England, a base that had been mothballed for a number of years. The people that I had met, my supervisors and other wing leaders, as well as my church community there, really lifted me up, and probably in ways that I didn't know, and certainly their prayers carried me along with a lot of other people who faced a lot of really difficult situations. I mean, we lost people. We lost a crew from Acre, a B-52, where I knew some of the guys that were on that plane, and it made it it hits you right in the face because you never know when the equipment's not going to work properly or the timing was a bit off, and you really are just leaning forward with being your best. but really knowing that it's not in your hands ever.
That is tough. Like, especially, I think for people like us, I feel like we're wired similarly.
Yeah,
Is that you, like, when we go into situations, like, we want to have control, right?
absolutely.
As a communicator, your job is to control the narrative. I mean, for better or worse, whether right?
Right.
But your job is to control this narrative, and when there's things out of our control, it feels very difficult.
It's disconcerting because you can plan and prep and rehearse, but then you have to perform and you have to execute. And you know, communicating is somewhat natural to me, but it does require that bit of effort. And as I mentioned, the people that God put in my path to pray for me and to be a witness themselves and how they carried themselves and how they lived their lives really helped me come to Him. So I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, at Kirtland Air Force Base. So I had come back from Desert Storm, and it was time to move. And so I moved to New Mexico, and I was the editor of a Air Force magazine, and had a first marriage that fell apart. And it was in that I finally realized that I needed Christ, and that there was no way I was going to get through that without Him. And as hard as that was, and as painful as it was, it set me up to really fall at His feet, to really recognize that He was the Lord of my life. And despite the demise of that marriage, or perhaps because of that, for His glory, I have an amazing husband. I have 2 beautiful daughters who reflect Him. I see Christ in their face every day. And despite all that pain, He's brought me through it. In fact, you know that poem about the footprints in the sand and how, Christ carries you when there's only one. Well, Christ was kind of dragging me through that sand, so you would see my feet prints making a tunnel in the sand. But He's been faithful all along.
Like, that's one thing I love about the analogy of agriculture. Even though I've said it before, I am from the city. This is my secondhand knowledge of agriculture. And I've seen my wife try to plant things. Bless you, baby. I love you. We don't have good luck with plants. But He allowed you to experience this season, right? The season of heartache, of hurt, of drought, of pain, of pruning, and honestly, not even really pruning, the death of who you were, right? To either A, replant you in another place, right? Or B, to grow you where you were. Either way, to grow you and to allow you to actually experience Him, right?
Yeah.
And the beauty that is He, as the farmer, as the great creator and cultivator, right? He allows us to experience these really hard things. Ultimately, 1, for His glory, but 2, for our good, right? And you see that it's so evident in the story you just told, right? You went through something that is very hard, and a lot of people experience, right? And it is, you get to a crossroads, right, of saying, like, I can go this way and my life can derail, or like I can turn in the only place I have ever been told to turn, by the people that have prayed for me, by the seeds that were planted by your mentors, by even the Catholic Church that plants. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these things that were planted in your life to help you eventually grow, right?
Right.
He used this scenario to do that, right?
And I think that agriculture analogy is so poignant and so vivid. And if it weren't for that family around me, the family away from the family I grew up with, and being able, when I was in Albuquerque, Hoffmantown Church was my home church, and fairly large church, but it became very, very small when I went through divorce care. And that is something that for anyone who experiences the demise of a relationship that you thought was built on faith, to experience that much like a death, I encourage your listening audience to pursue that. And it is from that you can work your way through it and mourn the loss while still finding strength in what your future holds.
Yeah, that's so good. It's so important. I think that one of the biggest themes that I hear from so many people is like to just keep taking steps forward, right? And by God's grace, for those of us that know Him, the best steps we can take are always towards Him, right?
Sure.
And I think that that's a lot easier said than done in a lot of scenarios, but it's important to know that, there are people out there that care and have been through it and will love you through it and help you walk through that. And, I think that that's such a cool thing to talk about, and I'm really glad that you were able to share that. Thank you.
And I wasn't really planning to share that today either. It just, I guess, the way you asked the question.
Listen, that's the beauty of this kind of platform, of this kind of format, is that I like being able to have those harder conversations, and I think that that's where we grow, right? It's easy to kind of hop in somewhere and kind of give that resume, right? This is not that place.
Right.
Like I want to hear about the times you got fired, right?
Well, came close a couple of times.
But yeah, so I think that, for me, that's where we learn and we grow and we thrive in Christ, is in the hard times and also in the wins and the successes as well. I think He can grow us and use us there too. So
sure.
I kind of want to move forward here a little bit.
Sure.
And I want to talk about a crucial date in American history, but also in your timeline, right? And really from my experience. And so I kind of, to go back, I was able to film the book release of your book,
right,
of Command the Crisis.
And you did a great job.
Thank you. Which was fantastic. I literally was texting my wife in the middle of it, like, I am inspired. Two, I'm blown away because, like, I had read up on you a little bit, just a little digging.
Yeah, a little stalking.
But like, I obviously hadn't had a chance to read the book yet; it wasn't out, and just to hear your stories, I was like just blown away, and it was so cool to me to see the people in the room that were there to support you.
Wow, I was blown away too,
and just the amount of love and care that I know that you put into the book. But also just the amount of love and care that the people there felt for you. And it was very evident to me through every single interaction. And that was really, really cool for me. And I just nerded out the whole time. So the thing that really struck me the most, honestly, in your talk was 9/11 and your experience at the Pentagon. And so that's kind of where I wanted to go next. And one, leading up to it, how did you even end up there at the Pentagon in that particular time, and kind of just talk about what happened there?
Sure. So early in my career, I, as a young officer, was able to go to the Pentagon and kind of, understand and learn what it was. So this is, aside from being a 5-sided building, it is where our national defense policy is created. And it's situated there, so it would be close to our national seat of government, just across the Potomac River. And so when I went and I learned about, one, there were so many other public affairs people like me there crafting messages and putting forth the narrative about our military, I'm like, I really want to have a job here one day, when I'm old enough, when I'm a big girl, right? And so, then I go on about my different stops along the way, and I go from New Mexico, where I accepted Christ, and then I go to Alaska, which was kind of a big jump. It was a huge job. It was 2 ranks higher than what I was at the time. So I was very fortunate that the wing commander at the time, had faith that I could perform the mission. But I was really in way over my head. But had gone from, the 5 different flying units we had it's a joint base Elmendorf Richardson. It was just a regular Elmendorf Air Force Base at the time. So had moved from there and had gotten that job at the Pentagon. That was my next stop on my career path. And so
we just need to put a little map up of all the places. Like this is like a.
I could do that. I should probably develop that visual.
Really
Okay.
You should put it on a T-shirt. It'll take up the whole shirt. You need like a long sleeve for it. But
that was a great tour. I had a fantastic team at Elmendorf. And then it's time to move. It's been 3 years, time to go. So my new husband and I moved from Anchorage, Alaska, to the D.C. area. And it's 5 weeks into this tour. We've accepted our household goods, all of our worldly possessions. We're getting situated. And Greg's looking for a job, decided he wanted to get into law enforcement. And I'm, figuring out how not to get lost in the building because it's got 3 rings and 3 levels and everything's got a number and a letter. And so you got to figure that out. So I was really excited on this particular day. As it turned out, it was the day I had my first interview with the general officer that I had prepared, set up a media interview for him. And so I was, elated. This is kind of, it's showtime, and we start our day and have our morning meeting. And then about just before 9 o'clock, we hear these reports about a plane had flown into one of the towers in New York. And unfortunately, I'd had to work the release of information about a plane crash when I was in Anchorage. So the questions that started rolling around in my head, well, what kind of a plane and why was it there and how big of a crew, how many people on board, what really could have happened that would put that plane in the side of that tower. And I had gone up to the front of our desk where we monitor all the news as part of our job. And I was watching, as many of your listeners were, as we all watched that second plane fly into that second tower. And any question that was a deliberate act was erased immediately. I mean, we were under attack in a way no one had experienced before. And a friend of mine on the Air Force press desk where I worked, he just kind of said behind me, Angela, there are people who say we could be a target here. And I really just kind of, paused for just a fleeting moment to consider that, went back to my desk, and I was finishing up a phone call. No sooner had I put the phone in the cradle than that third plane hit the Pentagon and just jarred everybody inside from left to right. And I instinctively ducked under my desk, having been trained to do so, and not really knowing, where the plane had impacted, not knowing, I think I thought it was a plane had hit the building, but that instinct to duck, and then when you look up and you're like, okay, I'm all right. Well, now what? Well, now we got to get out of this building. And so Teresa, whose desk was just across from mine, grabbed my arm and said, "Let's go this way." Which I'm really glad because I didn't.
Thank God for Teresa.
Absolutely. Thank God for Teresa. Yes, absolutely. So she and I and 28,000 other people stationed at the Pentagon started pouring out of their nearest exit. And it was strangely quiet in a place that's normally very, very loud. The plane is in the side of the building. Black smoke is pouring out over top of the building. And I hear chopper blades, and I ducked thinking, well, this is the second round. They're going to get the rest of us as we come out of the building. I thought this was a larger scale attack on America. And, then it became clear that they were our choppers. And then we looked for people that we, would recognize and where, okay, so now we're going to do, well, we got to go 24-hour operations. So it is only by God's grace that I was on the opposite side of the point of impact, but hundreds of others lost their life in those terrorist attacks. Thousands, from New York to Pentagon and to the last plane that landed in Pennsylvania.
Man, I mean, just hearing that, it's mind-boggling to just think back and remember on that moment and how, scary that was, and how I can't imagine, being there.
And we weren't prepared for that. I mean, if we were, nobody told me what the plan was.
If anyone was prepared, it wasn't you. But yeah, so what, can you tell me about what the next, like, you said 24-hour operation, what's the next 24 hours look like?
Well,
what's that mean?
So Teresa and I were volunteered to go home and then plan to come back and work the night shift. So we, along with a lot of other people, were just trying to get away. Traffic was at a standstill. Nothing was moving.
No cell service too, I'm assuming.
There was, because all the lines were jammed. Now, I had grabbed my phone, but it wasn't going to work. And fortunately, Teresa was, she was staying in a hotel nearby. She was a reservist who'd been activated. And I, fortunately, lived right in Arlington, so we could walk. And we did. She walked to her hotel room, and I kept going to my home in Arlington, passing other people, disheveled, the look of just shock and terror on their faces. And then when I get home, the phone's ringing. My boss had, we didn't have nobody had a recall roster with everybody's cell phone numbers loaded yet. So I had made handwritten notes, call my husband, call my wife to let them know I'm okay, but I don't know when I'm going to be able to come home. So as soon as I hit the door, the old-fashioned answer machine's blinking, and I had messages from my family. My sister immediately called again, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And then the floodgates open, and I, after responding in that instance, kind of let go, and I'm like, "I'm okay. Tell Mom I'm okay." And then it wasn't like we were going to 24-hour ops. The plane and the people were still on fire for days. And so once we'd accounted for our team, because there were people who were on the press desk who were in other locations and had gone out of different exits. So we, later that evening finally accounted for all of our people. In this case, Major Angela Billings at the time was not going to be saying anything about what had transpired. Our White House, the National Command Authority, took control of the narrative in that case to figure out what we as a nation was going to do. And so no one was saying anything. And that was the case for a number of weeks until we decided what our response was going to be. And those attacks changed procedures in airports that we all experience today. It also changed the way we handled diplomacy, because the terrorists were, residing and operating primarily in Afghanistan, and we as a nation knew we needed to go ferret them out. So our leaders, coordinated with the leaders of Afghanistan and neighboring nations. And at the time that I went to Afghanistan years later, 32 nations, part of NATO, became the security assistance force that would train up, ferret out the terrorists, and try to change things in Afghanistan.
That is insane. I mean, that is a lot to unpack. I think that if I could go into one direction,
sure.
For me is like, I want to know how it changed you. Like, I want to know, like, what outcomes, what, where your head went years later, kind of in response to that, and how you operated and how you lived your life, right?
So, and it certainly, experiencing something like that makes you value your life and your time and your loved ones far more than you did before. You thought you loved immensely before, well, you just ratcheted up another notch or two. And certainly, my husband was supportive of me. He wanted to do whatever he could to help me in this new role that I was in. He got into law enforcement, from a timing perspective right after those attacks. And then, fast forward years later, when we go into Afghanistan, it changed how we managed our forces from a very macro level. And so we developed a way that we would rotate our forces into that theater of operations, into that combat zone, so that we could manage that. For me as a spokesperson, I was able to deploy ISAF 10, so the 10th iteration of people moving in and out of Afghanistan in that rotational basis. I was part of that 10th iteration, and had the great fortune of training with some extraordinary individuals before deploying here in the United States. Even though Greg and I were stationed in Germany at the time, and I came back to the U.S. and did some training with those I would deploy with. Then went to Norway and was able to work with individuals from the international community. So not just U.S. people, but Turkish officers and, the Italians and the Canadians and the British. We all trained together before we deployed into theater in order to get the best possible outcomes.
That is truly incredible to see how, you guys banded together, and, the smartest people and the best people were in the spots that they needed to be in, and to produce a better outcome, and something like that would never happen again, right?
Right.
So to just completely fast forward once again, so we're fast forwarding 24 years. What are you doing now with the knowledge and experience and the plethora of people that you've gotten the opportunity to experience life with? How are you transitioning to help the people in your role, but also you're a small business owner as well, and you do a lot of really cool stuff, and so I want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So now that I'm a more mature woman with all this vast experience, it does bring me great joy to work with my amazing team at the Kentucky Senate, where we put forward, conservative policies that make for a better Kentucky. So I'm very fortunate in that regard. I also get to speak to other business leaders too about how important it is for you to think about your business and your brand when it comes time for when a crisis is going to present itself, because it will present itself. So I really feel like God has positioned me very uniquely to be able to do those sorts of things. And He's preserved me, despite my risky career and the multiple combat deployments, for what I'm doing today. And for the future, I don't think this is where I'm stopping. I'm a lean forward kind of girl, and so I feel very fortunate, very rich for the opportunities that I do have, and the love that I feel in my church community, my Bible study with a bunch of amazing ladies in Shelbyville, and my home church is Southeast Christian, and as large as it is, it feels really small to me because of the people and those relationships that I know, that community that the Lord has built around me. So I don't know exactly what's next. I feel like I'm kind of stepping into my own story at this point, having poured a lot of love into creating this book to capture some of those stories so that, other professional communicators, other business leaders can learn from my unique experience. That is only me. As unique as the Lord made me, He gave me experiences that I now can share with others. And I feel, just extraordinarily blessed for where I'm situated, today, even sitting in this chair right across from you, Dave.
That warms my soul, and I feel similarly blessed that I get to experience this with you as well, and get to hear your story and help tell it in this small way. And so when I think about the book and I think about what you're doing now from a speaking perspective as well, if somebody like wanted to have you come and speak to their organization of
Sure.
leaders or a group of leaders that they help coordinate stuff like that with, how can they contact you? What are the ways that people can get in touch with you?
Sure. So my book is available on Amazon, which is crazy. I'm part of the algorithm. It's amazing. So you can find my book on
I will
Amazon.
also make sure I link it in all the podcast show notes and everything like that too, so that way people can go right and buy it. So 'cause
Fantastic.
you need to go buy it. Listen, I'm looking at you. You need to go buy it.
My email, so my business is the Virago Circle, so you can find me online with that. You can send me an email at Angela@the Circle, and I cater my presentations to the audience that I'm speaking to. I've talked with business leaders from all industries, from education to health to banking and in finance. But I've also talked to other professional communicators like myself who may be a little younger and don't have the crisis communication experience that I have. And I can set up a workshop for those type who want to dive a little deeper and get a little more hands-on experience with, scenarios and what you do or don't do to get those, best possible outcomes from a crisis.
Man, I think that what you talk about is so impactful, and like you said, it can be any spectrum of business, not just business, but any spectrum of occupation in general. I mean, I think about all kinds of places that experience crisis on a weekly, monthly, yearly,
Absolutely
not as often as that basis. Like you said, from healthcare to I was a lower level manager at a large corporation, and like I think about the miniature crises that I experienced.
Sure.
And that, I just felt really unprepared for, right? And, you make the best decision possible, but when you have, learn and you grow, you get informed decision making, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's where it comes into play is like, I can make a good decision and I hope it works out, or I can make a really bad decision. I will learn from it. But like, if you can gather that beforehand and you can learn how to, navigate those hard conversations, those hard, instances that just naturally come up in any walk of life. I think that you would be a fantastic person to have come into those spaces. So I love that that's something that you're doing in a combination with your book. And so
Sure.
when people read the book, right? That's kind of my last question, maybe.
Okay.
When people read the book, like, what can they kind of expect from like a 10,000 foot view? Like,
Sure. So I take the experiences that I've had primarily in the military, but some in the Kentucky Senate as well. And I relay situations. I try to offer, what you need to know, what I learned from the situation and that you can apply to your business. I include some case studies of other instances where businesses have either done extraordinarily well and they're a great test case for how to handle a crisis, or perhaps they missed the mark because they weren't paying attention or they didn't really treat those tweets or those social media posts serious enough, and things kind of spiraled out of control. I mean, with technology, what it is today, and the internet being as wide and vast as it is, a crisis can run away from you very, very quickly. So, when I do talk to leaders, if I can leave you with this, the important things are about planning, the element of time, and really stepping into your story and owning your narrative. If you've made a mistake, don't listen to the lawyers. Say you're sorry if you made a mistake, and then learn from it. Change your business process, refine it, and become a better business and a better brand when you're presented with a crisis. So that's what I hope I offer my readers, And as I indicated, it really can apply to just about any industry at really any level of the organization that you're in, whether you're just starting your career or you're the president of, a large corporation. There are some nuggets in this book that I would think that you would take to heart.
Man, and I think you've hit so many great points, but one thing that you bring up and that made me think about that question in general is because, I think, had I not heard from you, right, and I'm just get a quick blurb about the book or about you, I'm not in the military, probably doesn't bother me. I'm not, the PR person for the Kentucky, state Senate majority, right? That doesn't apply to me, but these things, the experiences that you have and the outcome and the aftermath, and I've read into some of the case studies that you have in there, and they're so important, and they're really not, they're not going to age. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like they're going to age gracefully, right? Because these things, no matter how things evolve from an internet perspective or whatever, these things are going to happen in some way, shape, or form to you as a leader, and if they are, you should be prepared for that, right? And I think that
exactly.
I hear so often, I'm like one of those people. I used to be big into the whole guru space, listening to all these amazing business leaders and all these things, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But people need to know that investing in your business is more than just doing these going 80,000 miles for a conference and doing all that. Those are all great stuff too,
right?
But there's people like what you do specifically here in this moment that can have major impact on your business, and it can be a great investment for you and your leaders.
Absolutely. And it really does. It pays off in spades if you've already met the people that you're going to be going through the crisis with, whether that's local government leaders or the local law enforcement, knowing who you're going to call on your team when something bad happens, and that you're going to have to flex. And it may not be 24-hour operations, but you might be pulling some late nights
right.
to manage through that crisis. But being able to kind of game plan that, and we do that in the military. We are all about training
of
and
course, yeah.
War gaming it. There's great value to that.
Yeah.
There's great value to that.
I totally agree with that, and I think that you have taught me a lot of valuable lessons, even just in our brief time together. And I am just super appreciative of you taking the time to come and talk to me today and to our audience. And I think that you just have such a valuable array of experience, and I love the way that you communicate that.
Wow.
And the fact that you're a sister in Christ just is icing on the cake, and I'm super thankful for you and your family. And having gotten to meet them, and they're extremely kind. Your husband's fantastic, and you do have two wonderful daughters that are extremely talented in their own right. And so I think that you are very blessed. And
absolutely.
I feel fortunate to be in contact with you, and thankful that I get to see your updates on LinkedIn and Facebook and those sorts of places. And I'm excited and hopeful that the people that listen and watch this will check out your book, and will be supporters of yours as well, and hopefully we can collaborate on more things. And
I would love that, Dave. It's been a real privilege to be here with you.
Thank you.
And share a little bit of my story and my experience that I hope helps others as they navigate the many trials that we are all faced with every day. And the affection is mutual. It's good to know another brother in Christ. Yeah. And I love to help and lift up businesses that are founded in biblical principles. So that always makes me feel good too.
Yeah, good, awesome. Well, thank you again, Angela. Thank you everybody that's listened and tuned in. We appreciate you. If you want to know anything else about Angela, please look below. We're going to have her website linked down there, a link to the book. Where you can kind of find her there. Again, thank you to One Stop Media Kentucky, for sponsoring this episode. Shout out to Matt, our producer at SmallBatch Studio. And that's all. Until next time.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave.